I wanted to just touch on the psychology. You've mentioned it a few times, and when you're training for events like going around the world, how are you training yourself psychologically for it? Do you feel this is something you were able to train, or do you feel it was almost innately within you from your experiences growing up, or yeah, what's your outlook on that?
I think, that sort of that four-letter word, grit, the ability to keep going is definitely a learned behavior. You can't, for sure, you'll have people who are, socially very different. They're more comfortable on their own or not. But as an athlete, whether you're in a team environment or doing a solo sport, the ability to really dig deep within yourself and to make the hardest hours count, not just sort of wish them away, is definitely a learned behavior. You can train in the gym, you can become physically very fit, all your numbers can be great. But as an endurance adventure athlete, probably the same, as a field athlete playing cricket, when it comes to the big tests, you have to have been there. You have to
Mm.
have, you can't write checks that you've not trained for. You can be physically very able, you can be very impressive, but if you don't believe and have the comfort zone to take on very, very difficult things, then it's very, very hard to write those checks when you're in the event. So, cycling around the world the first time set me up to do it the second time. All the expeditions in between those two rides, which were a decade apart, by the time you reach one horizon, which you thought was your Everest, that was the biggest thing you'd ever done, you then see how that leads to the next, the next, the next. So I can look back over my career over the last 15 years, and there's a very clear chronology. It looks very professional, it looks very sure-footed, it looks almost quite inevitable. Whereas that's only the way you look at a career going back the way. And I
Mm.
think anyone who's been suitably ambitious in their career over a decade plus, nobody else should be able to step into your shoes and do what you do. I'd say they can be physically as able, they can have the skill set, they can have read the books, but unless they've lived in your shoes, just like anything in life, we don't need to be talking about sport here, but you need to get to a point, as an operator where you're valued because of who you are, not just what you do.
Mm.
It goes back to my very original point about not living in a meritocracy. If it was purely about the core skill set, which you could learn in a classroom or a gym, then anyone could do it. But it's not. It's about your network. It's about your life experience. It's about your ability to cope under pressure. How are you when you turn the heat up? So that grit, that resolve, that mindset is the biggest learned behavior. And what I always say to people who have these big ambitions, certainly in adventure sport, is shoot for the stars for sure. Take on your biggest dream, but do your apprenticeship. You
Mm.
have to. You can't fall out of bed and do these things. So I never put people off trying to take on their biggest dreams, but it's not where you start. Not because you wouldn't have the physical ability to, but you just wouldn't have the toolkit, the mindset, the knowledge to deal with, and you're limited. Your experience would be so limited that when things do go wrong, you wouldn't know how to rationalize contingencies. You wouldn't know how to. You wouldn't have the coping mechanisms in those dynamics. So the other very quick point is, once you get to real crisis points on expeditions, once you end up on those really, really hard points on the field, you really, really do think back to similar situations. You are very much, and also you don't think of failing because you've lost the objectivity on that situation. It's not a moment in time when you're put into a crisis. The crisis normally happens to you over a short or long period of time. But my point is, by the time you get there, you're just fighting incredibly hard to keep going, to keep the momentum in the project. And it's only afterwards you look back and go, how did I do that? Like,
Mm.
how did I have the ability to fight that hard? But it's because when you're in it, you're so in it, you're so at the coalface, and you've lost that ability to almost see yourself doing it. So it no longer becomes a question of can I do it or not. It becomes a very simple question of what can I do to keep going? How do I keep the momentum in the project?